People talk about rock bottom, that when you hit rock bottom is when you'll make a change. But there's a corresponding place that I call cliff top, right? Like where you get so high that you realize literally none of this stuff can make you happy.
Oh, wow. Will Smith just smacked the shit out of me.
Will Smith didn't walk into Hollywood as a gamble. He walked in as a sure thing. For almost 20 years, his name alone guaranteed packed theaters and blockbuster weekends. Studios didn't hire him hoping for success. They hired him knowing the box office would explode. When Will was on the poster, profits were basically locked in. By the late 90s and early 2000s, he wasn't just another star. He was the superstar everyone trusted. He was pulling in more than $30 million a movie. No questions asked. Executives believed in him like clockwork. Audiences adored him, and international fans treated him like royalty. In a business where fame fades faster than a tweet, Will Smith seemed untouchable.
Jada, I love you. G.I. Jane 2, can't wait to see it. All right? That was a nice one. Okay. I'm out here. Richard. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It was a G.I. Jane jump.
Keep my wife's name out your mouth.
I'm going to, okay? Okay. That was a greatest night in the history of television. Okay.
That level of power didn't just fall into his lap. It was pure calculation. Will studied the science of fame like a pro athlete studying game tape. He learned when to smile, when to pause, what roles to take, and what to stay far away from. He stayed out of messy drama, kept his image squeaky clean, and played it smart. No profanity, no reckless moves, no taking sides. He built himself into a universal brand. Kids loved his humor. Parents trusted his movies. Overseas fans couldn't get enough of his charm. Even when critics rolled their eyes at a few projects, ticket sales barely budged. Whether it was aliens attacking, secret agents saving the world, or cities falling apart, audiences didn't care what chaos hit the screen. Because when Will Smith showed up, people knew everything would turn out fine by the end credits. Producers weren't chasing trophies, they wanted numbers, and Will Smith delivered them like a machine.
Why didn't you apologize to Chris in your acceptance speech? I was fogged out by that point. It's all fuzzy. I've reached out to Chris, and the message that came back is that he's not ready to talk, and when he is, he will reach out.
Every movie was a guaranteed moneymaker, a perfect product from a man who seemed unstoppable. But behind that confident smile was a mastermind carefully engineering more than just blockbuster hits. He was crafting a persona, the charming hero, the loyal husband, the picture of control in a business overflowing with chaos. While other stars crashed and burned in scandals, Will stood tall, clean, and composed. That squeaky clean image became just as valuable as his acting chops. By the mid-2000s, he wasn't just famous. He was a brand, built on charm, emotional awareness, and laser-focused discipline. People didn't just watch his movies, they rooted for him. He wasn't just playing heroes on screen, he was living like one off-screen. The industry saw that loyalty and rewarded it with endless trust and respect. And Will knew how rare that level of love really was. So when the cracks started to show, it didn't even feel real. There were no arrests, no wild paparazzi shots, no immediate chaos in the headlines. The downfall started quietly, then built, then exploded right in front of millions. In just a few seconds, decades of polished perfection shattered on live television. To really grasp why that moment hit so hard, you have to understand everything his image stood for and how fast it all came crashing down. To really get what went down, you've got to rewind to 2016. That was the year Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith made headlines by boycotting the Oscars, calling out Hollywood for its lack of diversity in nominations. Their protest wasn't just a quiet stand, it shook the industry, but it also threw them straight into the fire of public criticism.
Chris, I apologize to you.
That same night, host Chris Rock addressed the boycott live on stage. He turned it into a joke, framing it less like a movement and more like personal frustration. The audience laughed, the cameras caught every smirk and reaction, and Will stayed silent. But moments like that don't just disappear. They linger in the background, waiting for the next spark. Fast forward to March 27, 2022. The night was electric. Will Smith was finally about to win his first Oscar after decades of chasing that golden validation. The mood inside the Dolby Theater was easy, full of celebration, and the world was watching live. Then Chris Rock walked out to present an award. Doing what comedians do, he dropped a quick joke about Jada Pinkett Smith's shaved head. The crowd laughed. Even Will laughed for a second. But then the air shifted. Jada's expression said everything without a word. Will's smile vanished. He stood up, walked straight toward the stage, and smacked Chris Rock across the face. Live, in front of millions. The entire room froze in disbelief. For a moment, people thought it had to be staged. Then he sat back down and yelled, "Keep my wife's name out your mouth." The broadcast cut the sound, but social media didn't miss a beat. Within seconds, the internet exploded. What should have been the greatest night of Will Smith's career turned into one of the most shocking moments ever caught on live TV. Just minutes after that jaw-dropping slap, he walked back onto the same stage, this time to accept his very first Oscar. He was in tears, his voice cracking as he spoke about love, protection, and the crushing pressure of fame. He apologized vaguely to everyone, but noticeably not to Chris Rock.
It's a situation that I consider private.
You just feel like it ain't really nobody's business. But now Black Twitter has claimed it as their business.
Yeah, we basically, we broke up.
And then what did you do, Jada?
Well, I think from there, as time went on, I got into a different kind of entanglement with August.
An entanglement?
Yes. Yes.
A relationship?
Yes, it was a relationship, absolutely.
Later, when asked why he didn't say sorry to Chris in that speech, Will explained, I was fogged out by that point. It's all fuzzy. I've reached out to Chris, and the message that came back is that, he's not ready to talk. And when he is, he will reach out. His words sounded heavy, almost lost in regret. Then came the hammer from the Academy, a 10-year ban. He was barred from attending the Oscars or any related events for a full decade. For a man who had spent his entire career chasing Hollywood's approval, that punishment cut deep. Soon after, Will resigned from the Academy, releasing both written and video apologies, carefully worded, emotional, and visibly remorseful. But by that point, the public tide had already turned. Behind the scenes, the damage spread fast. Big-budget films were quietly put on hold. Other projects disappeared completely. Studios started running risk assessments before attaching his name. The man who once symbolized safety and success suddenly looked unpredictable. And in Hollywood, perception is everything. One wrong move can change your entire legacy overnight. Even longtime friends in the industry began stepping back, not out of anger, but out of pure caution. The real chaos came from the contradiction at the heart of it all. Will Smith had built his entire empire on control, emotional strength, discipline, calm under pressure. But that slap, it was raw, unfiltered, and witnessed by the whole planet. For a man whose image stood on composure, that one impulsive act tore through everything he'd built. The Oscar he had dreamed of for decades no longer symbolized victory. It became permanently tied to scandal. What should have been his greatest achievement turned into the turning point of his career. Every word he spoke after sounded defensive, and every moment of silence seemed to scream louder than any apology. The official punishment, the Academy's 10-year ban, was harsh, but the real blow was losing the cultural respect he'd earned over decades. And truthfully, the cracks didn't start in 2022. The ground had already been shaking long before that night. Years earlier, singer August Alsina dropped a bombshell claiming he had a romantic relationship with Jada Pinkett Smith and that Will knew about it and had even given his blessing. The internet exploded. Headlines went wild, talk shows dissected every angle, and speculation ran non-stop. The story was never fully confirmed, but the heat was intense enough to force a public response. That response came on Red Table Talk. Will and Jada sat side by side, facing the world. Jada admitted there had been a period of separation and called her connection with August an entanglement. Will pressed for clarity, and she confirmed it had been romantic. It was framed as healing and honesty, but the internet wasn't buying it. Clips of Will's forced smile and teary eyes spread like wildfire. Memes flooded every feed. Sympathy turned into mockery, and the couple's once polished image started to crumble right in front of everyone. What really shook people wasn't just the entanglement itself. It was the dynamic between them. Jada came across calm, composed, and almost detached, while Will looked exposed, uneasy, and fighting to hold it together. That contrast hit viewers hard. From that moment on, the image he'd spent decades perfecting began to crumble piece by piece. The silence that once made him seem strong now came off as confusion, and every new public discussion about their marriage opened the door to more judgment. The once invincible movie icon suddenly looked human, and not in a way fans were used to seeing. People weren't seeing the charming superstar anymore. They were watching a man struggling to keep control of a life that used to look flawless. The slap didn't create the cracks. It simply made them impossible to ignore. When that moment exploded on live TV, the entire world stopped seeing only Will Smith, the legend. They saw the man underneath the shine. The pressure, the emotion, the exhaustion, it all came crashing out in real time. By the time Will walked onto that Oscar stage in 2022, it wasn't just about standing up for his wife. It was about defending the identity he'd been fighting to hold on to for years. That moment was the breaking point of pressure that had been building quietly, long before his hand ever touched Chris Rock's face. The slap didn't cause the collapse. It revealed it to millions, live and unfiltered. When people replay that infamous moment now, they don't just see rage, they see years of built-up pressure finally spilling over. The polished, camera-ready image of the perfect Smith family suddenly looked fragile. The public had always been invited into their world. Hey, come meet our family, put my jacket on, fix my tie. The picture-perfect household everyone admired. But behind that flawless presentation, things were shifting. Hollywood watched closely as Jaden Smith seemed destined to follow right in his father's footsteps, first acting alongside Will, then branching out with his own style and energy. His early performances screamed star power. It looked like greatness was a guarantee. But over time, that unstoppable rise began to stall. Movie roles got fewer, then nearly disappeared altogether. Jaden pivoted into music and fashion, spaces that celebrated creativity over commercial success. His public appearances became rare, and every time he surfaced, fans dissected everything. His health, his mindset, his direction. What once looked like fearless originality started to seem more like uncertainty. Then came stories about Jaden wanting independence at a really young age. Not scandalous, but symbolic. It added to the growing sense that the Smith household might not have been as rock solid as it looked on the surface. Willow's path told a different story, but carried its own heavy weight. Thrust into global fame before she was even a teenager, she faced pressure that would crush most adults. Years later, she bravely opened up about struggling with depression and self-harm, connecting much of that pain to growing up under constant public attention. Her honesty was raw, powerful, and real, but it also changed how people saw the Smiths. The once unbreakable dynasty now looked like a family under enormous strain, still talented, still admired, but undeniably human. They no longer looked untouchable. They looked human, vulnerable. It became a striking example of what happens when fame hits before there's any real protection from it. Private pain turned into public discussion before the wounds could even start to heal. And once again, Will Smith didn't look like the mastermind carefully steering his image. He looked like a man trying to respond after the damage had already been done. None of this came from cruelty or neglect, but perception doesn't wait for explanations. As conversations kept piling up about marriage, masculinity, parenting, and control, the myth of flawless leadership started to crumble. The man who once commanded every room he walked into suddenly seemed surrounded by chaos he couldn't manage.
Hey, come meet our family.
Go home. Put my jacket on.
Okay.
Put my tie up.
Very nice shirt.
So Jaden, this is your first premiere. How you feeling?
Pretty much the boss wherever she goes, which is why I named her Reign, R-E-I-G-N. So she gets it naturally. Her mom and her dad, we can be some pretty bossy people.
By the time audiences saw him after the slap, they weren't just seeing the confident movie star from the early 2000s. They were seeing a husband, a father, a public figure taking hit after hit, each one chipping away at that aura of invincibility that once made him larger than life. What would you say to the people who looked up to you before the slap? The people who say you let them down? That question still hangs in the air. Heavy, impossible to dodge. But instead of disappearing, Will Smith made a bold move. He stayed visible. He didn't vanish into silence or hide behind the Hollywood machine. He chose to face it all, to rebuild himself in front of the same world that watched him break. Reinvention in real time. That's not damage control. That's survival under a spotlight that never turns off. Will Smith's comeback plan wasn't silence, it was exposure. He went all in with podcasts, interviews, speeches, and long reflections about ego, pain, and accountability. He called the Oscar moment a wake-up call, describing it as both a breakdown and a breakthrough. His tone shifted into something almost spiritual, like he was trying to turn public humiliation into enlightenment. But not everyone was ready for that message. For some, the non-stop appearances felt way too soon. Every interview reopened the wound people were still trying to forget. What he called transparency often came across as rehearsed. His sincerity became a debate, and his timing drew criticism. It felt like no matter what he said, he couldn't catch up with how tired the public had grown of hearing about that night. Then came his big pivot to the digital world. Suddenly, Will Smith was showing up with YouTubers, streamers, and viral creators, stepping into spaces that had nothing to do with Hollywood red carpets. Some moments felt clever and self-aware, but others just looked awkward. Instead of a legend effortlessly blending across generations, people saw a superstar trying too hard to fit in where authenticity can't be faked. The humor that once came so naturally now felt cautious. Every smile looked calculated. Every laugh carried tension. The easy charm that once made him unstoppable seemed replaced by nervous energy, like he was walking on eggshells with every public move. And that's what made his comeback stumble, not a lack of effort, but misreading the culture. Will tried to rebuild his image by explaining it, but that's not how trust works. In today's world, reputation can't be reasoned or talked back into place, because once the audience shifts their perception, there's no rewind button. Sometimes silence can heal, but constant exposure, it just keeps reopening the wound. Both Hollywood and the fans could feel it. Will Smith wasn't canceled, but he wasn't fully welcome back either. He existed in this weird middle zone, still visible but floating without direction. He was active, but uncertain, trying to control a story that had already escaped his hands. The harder he tried to shape his comeback, the more obvious it became. The narrative had moved on without him. Then came the next chapter, music. Will turned back to hip-hop, not for nostalgia, but for confession. He called it a personal project, a chance to face his demons instead of hiding behind polished interviews. He even reached out to legends like Jay-Z and Kendrick Lamar for guidance. Their advice? Simple but powerful. Stop performing the image. Tell the truth. And Will listened. His album tackled everything: ego, shame, regret, and the public chaos that followed him since the Oscars. For the first time, he wasn't trying to be the world's favorite hero. He just wanted to be understood. But when it dropped, the reaction hit hard. Critics called it awkward and overly serious. What Will saw as vulnerability, many heard as defensiveness. Instead of redemption, some listeners felt he was still trapped in that same night, still trying to explain it away. Commercially, things didn't land much better. The numbers were flat, the buzz faded fast, and the internet, ruthless as ever, turned the songs into memes. Listeners didn't hear evolution, they heard repetition. What was meant to be a powerful emotional release ended up reminding everyone just how far Will Smith's public image had fallen, and how tough it would be to climb back up again. Will kept pushing forward, dropping more visuals, more performances, doubling down on bright colors, high energy, and optimism. But the disconnect never faded. The tone felt off, too young, too flashy, too far removed from the legacy and maturity tied to his name. What once felt powerful now seemed forced. Instead of expanding his space and culture, his presence started to feel smaller inside it. Music had once made Will Smith a global superstar, but now it revealed the limits of how far he could reinvent himself. Hollywood didn't punish him for trying, but it didn't celebrate him either. Each new release came with the same unspoken question: is this genuine growth or desperation disguised as redemption? Yeah, that was a horrific night, he once said, his voice breaking with honesty. The words sounded real, but reality doesn't rewrite history. The truth is, Will's fall wasn't caused by one moment. It was the result of timing, pressure, and years of quiet buildup finally bursting into view. The slap didn't end his career. It simply confirmed the doubts people had already been whispering. The image of emotional control, the very foundation of his stardom, collapsed in seconds, exposing all the weight he'd been carrying underneath. And once that illusion shattered, everything he did afterward was seen through that lens. He's still working, still showing up on screen, still making moves, but the magic has changed. The automatic goodwill, the instant trust, the belief that Will always knows what he's doing. It's gone. Now every project, every word, every performance has to earn what used to come effortlessly. Yet even with all the chaos, his story refuses to wrap up neatly. It's still unfolding, still unpredictable, still deeply human. Unlike so many stars who vanished after a fall, Will Smith didn't disappear. He stayed visible. He faced the backlash head-on, took every punch of criticism, and even allowed himself to be questioned, joked about, and dissected in public. That kind of persistence makes his story complicated. It's not a clean fall or an easy redemption. It's messy, human, and still unfolding. Time has a way of reshaping outrage into understanding and pain into perspective. But in the end, a legacy is built on defining moments, and Will Smith's defining moment is no longer a record-breaking movie or a golden trophy. It's that one impulsive act that flipped his entire story upside down. Hollywood doesn't like to admit it, but massive success doesn't shield anyone from collapse. It often speeds it up. When an image built on perfection finally cracks, rebuilding it isn't about control or charm. It takes patience, humility, and time away from the spotlight. And those are lessons Will Smith is still learning in real time, right in front of the world. So now the real question is, do you think Will Smith's downfall came from that single unforgettable moment, or was it a slow unraveling of an image that was never as unbreakable as it seemed? Drop your thoughts below. I want to know what you think. And if you made it this far, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and leave a comment down below. Let's keep this conversation going. See you in the next one.